Well, good morning. It is great to be with all of you once again. I appreciate Mark reading it. Didn't mean to give him the hard names, but I appreciate him trying through it anyway. As you can tell, apparently my son wants to preach today. He is being quite loud. He's finding his voice quite well, so I apologize. I'm not really apologizing for making noise, but I apologize if I get distracted because I hear his voice while we're going through today. All right, so we just read in 2 Chronicles chapter 34 a great example of King Josiah, who started out being a king at a very young age of 8 years old. And I want to kind of talk about his example and what we can learn from this small text in 2 Chronicles 34. So if you have your Bibles, please keep it open there. It's going to be our base text this morning as we're going through talking about righteous indignation. Now, when we say righteous indignation, I want to help define that for you in case you haven't heard the term before. To be indignant means to be angry or to look at something while you're despising it, to turn your face against something. And when we say righteous indignation, usually what that means, if you are righteously indignant in common talk, right, it means that you believe you're in the right and they're in the wrong, and so you're going to be angry or indignant against them because you know that you're right. Maybe that happens with a spouse in an argument sometimes, right, where you know you're right, and so therefore you shall with righteous indignation drive your point home, right, because you know you're right. However, when we talk biblically, what we really mean is the righteousness of God fueling indignation towards something. And that sometimes is a confusing point for us as Christians, because oftentimes when we think of anger and jealousy, hatred, those are very negative things. We usually correlate those things with sin. And oftentimes they ought to be. I mean, that an angry outburst is sin. Be angry and do not sin, right? Do not be jealous. Do not covet your neighbor's property or what they have or their wife, right? Don't do those things. Those things are sinful. However, we do find in the Bible that anger, jealousy, and hatred turn towards the correct things is actually godly. And this example that we just read about in 2 Chronicles 34 with Josiah is a good example of what righteous indignation can lead to in a godly way. So I want us to look at that. So if you read through that with Mark there in 2 Chronicles 34, 1 through 8, I want to just point out a couple things here as we go through that section. The first one being that Josiah was only 8 years old when he became king. And that's a lot of responsibility to lead a nation of millions of people when you're 8 years old. And if you know anything about the kings of Judah, the lineage of kings were not very righteous, to say the least, right? Many of them walked in their own ways and worshipped a lot of idols and led the people away. Think of Manasseh or Ahaz, and you can go through the list, right? There are many of them. But Josiah decides at the young age to be different than all those fathers before him. And if you look at when he turned 16 years old, right, so 8 years later, he decides that he is going to purge Jerusalem and purge Israel of this idolatry that he inherited. So he sets his face to seek the Lord, is what the text says. Do you see that? He sets his face to seek after God. And so therefore, he goes throughout all the land and purges the idols. And then, whenever he turns, once he's done purging the idols, he then sets his face on repairing the house. So a couple of observations. First one would be, what would cause Josiah to execute such harsh and quick judgment on the idolatry? When you think of the harshness of it, right, grease upon the altars of the idols. It's pretty harsh, and he would scatter their bones out and the remains of the altars on the graves of the priests. And that actually fulfilled Jeroboam back in the early books of the Kings. But he has this harsh and quick judgment, and he travels on this almost crusade throughout all of Israel, tearing down all this idolatry. You ask the question, well, why? Why would Josiah do such a thing? Well, I think it's simply that he was seeking God. And when you seek God, when Josiah is seeking God, he realizes all of the idolatry, the sinful culture of Jerusalem and Israel that he inherited is so far in contrast to God's perfect and holy nature that he has to eradicate it. He has to get it gone out of the kingdom because no one can focus on a worship to God when that sin is so prevalent in the culture. He wants to lead people back to God. He himself wants to seek after godly worship. But he can't do that if the entire nation is going to the high place and sacrificing to the Asherah, or to the Baals, or to Nehushtan, or to Molech, or you insert your false god. It's all over the place. At every high hill they were sacrificing their kids, and they had priests of all these different idols. It is so prevalent in the culture. And rather than, I want you to notice this, rather than start with implementing temple worship, Josiah eradicates the idolatry, removes the sin that's in the way of following God. That's a really interesting point that we can learn from Josiah, who was only 16 years old. But he set his face to seek the Lord. So he begins by removing the sin rather than institution of temple worship. But then, as we saw in verse 8, he does begin that temple, restoring the temple. Now, if you would, you're going to read down with me in verse 14 as we continue the story of Josiah. Verse 14 through 21, I'll go ahead and read. It says that this is while they're cleaning out the temple and restoring the temple. It says that while they were bringing out the money that had been brought into the house of the Lord, Hilkiah the priest found the book of the law the Lord had given through Moses. Then Hilkiah answered and said to Shaphan the secretary, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan. Shaphan brought the book to the king and further reported to the king, all that was committed to your servants they are doing. They have emptied out the money that was found in the house of the Lord and have given it to the hand of the overseers and the workmen to repair it. Then Shaphan the secretary told the king, Hilkiah the priest has found me a book. And Shaphan went and read it before the king. And when the king heard the words of the law, he tore his clothes. And the king commanded Hilkiah, Ahikam the son of Shaphan, Abdon the son of Micah, Shaphan the secretary, and Asaiah the king's servant, saying, Go inquire of the Lord for me, for those who are left in Israel and in Judah, concerning the words of the book that have been found. For great is the anger of the Lord that is poured out on us, because our fathers have not kept the word of the Lord to do according to all that is written in this book. So Josiah has these workmen going to repair the temple, and they're cleaning it out. They're emptying the treasury so they can use those funds to pay the contractors, basically, to fix up the temple. That's what's going on. And while they're searching and they're cleaning out the temple to get that money out, they find this valuable book of the law. It hasn't been read in Israel. The statutes have been forgotten in Israel. And when they read the book of the law, they say, we need to take this to the king. And when they take it to the king, when he hears it, his mind goes to, the wrath of the Lord must be great against us for the sins that we have done, right? Notice how Josiah realizes God's law is holy. Here is the holy statute that we're supposed to be following. Here's the kingdom that I received. And look at the contrast. And his mind instantly goes to the Lord's anger. And he tears his clothes and is mournful and emotionally driven out of that anger because he realizes with righteous indignation the holy statutes of God and where his people have fallen short. It's an amazing thing that Josiah goes through. And this is confirmed in verse 24 and 25, where the Lord says that his anger is so great upon the children of Judah and the children of Israel that there will be destruction coming. And Josiah, I won't make it happen in your days, is what the Lord tells Josiah, but it's coming nonetheless because they have failed to follow the words of the law. The culture, right, has gotten so far, it's degraded so far. The minds of the people continually on evil. God sent his prophets to try to change their minds. He tried to get them to start following his statutes again, and they were unwilling to do so. So it was an incurable wound, is what Jeremiah calls it, an incurable wound that cannot be healed. And so therefore, there will be judgment coming. But even in the face of that, I want us to look at one last section here in this chapter, verses 31 through 33. After being told all of this, that Josiah still pays attention to. Look at this in verse 31. It says, And the king stood in his place, after hearing, right, all of this, that there will be destruction coming nonetheless. He stands in his place and makes a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord and keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all of his heart and all of his soul, to perform the words of the covenant that were written in this book. Then he made All who were present in Jerusalem and Benjamin joined in it. And the inhabitants of Jerusalem did according to the covenant of God and the God of their fathers. And Josiah took away all the abominations from Israel, and made all who were present in Israel serve the Lord their God. All his days they did not turn away from following the Lord, the God of their fathers. That is an amazing leader, Josiah, the young man who became king and decided to set his face to seek the Lord. And he realizes the culture and the abominations that are present in Israel. And so he eradicates them and tries to turn people's hearts towards God. And even when told this will not be enough, judgment is still coming, he enters a covenant with God and determines to do what is within his power to make all those who are in Judah and in Israel follow the same covenant. He's the king. He gets to determine what types of rules and statutes are going to be in place. I mean, something that I would be tempted to do if I were in that position is, what's the point, right? I mean, the destruction's coming either way. Let these people live how they want to live anyway. That's not what Josiah does. He removes the abominations, fueled out of a righteous indignation for God, removes the abominations and dictates the rules that Israel shall follow, and they all enter a covenant with God together. That's what Josiah did with the power that he had. So I'll make a couple of observations from Josiah here. The first one is that when we seek God, we realize the stains of sin even more clearly. And I think this makes sense, especially for those who were not raised in the church, right? But maybe you are coming to Christ now or recently come to Christ, and you start realizing the things in your life that are against God's will. That as you start trying to seek God, you start realizing that some bad habits that might be existing in the life, or different places in the world of things that you wouldn't even think about, right? The language that's being used or what's being shown on television, things that you wouldn't even think about. As you go closer to God, you start realizing even clearer. But that process doesn't stop, right, when you become a Christian. As you continue to draw closer to God, it continues to point out your own flaws, right? As James calls it, it's the perfect mirror, that law of liberty, that's going to point out your flaws. And it should change you because you realize the ways that you are sinful compared to God's law. And the closer and closer that you draw to God, the more that you're going to see the stain of sin on yourself and around you. And that's an important point for us to recognize, because there is sin all around us, and we don't want to become complacent to it. We don't want to just be okay with the stain of sin that's sitting either on us or around us in the world. And the more that we seek after God, and the more that we're transformed to be more like Jesus and be more like God, we ought to have more righteous indignation for the fact that there's so much sin against God's nature, right? If you would, turn over to 2 Peter chapter 2 here. 2 Peter chapter 2, I think, has a really good insight into the story of Lot that kind of helps us paint this righteous indignation here. 2 Peter chapter 2, I'm going to read in verse 7. It says that if he rescued, that is God, rescued righteous Lot, who was greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked. For as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, right? So this righteous man Lot in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, he is a righteous man seeking after God. And it says that the sensual conduct of the people around him, we don't live in Sodom and Gomorrah, but in a lot of times, I look around in America, I think, man, it's not really that far away. What I struggle with is to believe that my soul is being tormented when I look around at the sin around me. And that's the example that we have of righteous Lot. That there's so much sin around him, and he sees the sensual conduct. The stain of that sin is so evil to him that he's fueled with zeal, right? Fueled with righteous indignation that it torments his soul. And yet I look on the news, And how often do we see evil that's around us? All the time. I mean, how many times do we hear about the sin that is driving marriages apart? Whether that is with addictions to drugs or alcohol or pornography or adultery, and then the divorce that splits and destroys homes and families, and you hear about that, and is your heart wrenched, through that? Are you tormented by hearing that type of sin that's around you? Or you hear about the ways that there's violence going on in America, and the ways that even school shootings are happening, and is your heart tormented by reading about that? Or has it become so commonplace that you don't even think about it? Or how about the fact that millions of poor innocent souls were deemed not to be living and are aborted? Does that hurt your soul? Or that even with this epidemic going on, that the young people especially feel so depressed and so worthless that they believe it's better to take their own life? Does that hurt your soul? Are you okay with it? Does it torment you to live upon this earth day after day, like righteous Lot? Sin is in opposition to our holy God. And we hate sin. And sin has corrupted this world, and Satan has done that with his schemes. And we think about this sin, and it fuels you, and I get a little bit heated as I am right now on it. It gets me angry at Satan for what he's doing to billions of people in this world. Billions of precious souls that he's leading to eternal condemnation. And it gets you angry, as it ought to. And that's righteous indignation that you're feeling when you feel that way. And we're not angry at the person who's committing the sin. We're not angry at anybody in that way. We hate the sin that is in opposition to our holy God. Our holy God is the banner of righteousness and peace and comfort and love, and that's what our God proclaims and what is the invitation to all the world. And Satan comes in and ruins it. In Matthew chapter 13, I just have it for reference, right? This is the story of the tares that sowed in among all of the wheat. And it says that the destroyer, right, the enemy, who is Satan, comes in and plants behind all these tares. Another good verse I have up here is Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, which is talking about the end of time, but that great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. I hope and pray that each of us doesn't think Satan is our friend and is okay with having a neutral stance against Satan. I hope your heart is on fire and angry against Satan and what he's doing to all of the precious souls of the children of the earth. Because it's evil, it's corrupt, he's destroying the world. That's what Satan does, leads the whole world astray. So continuing on some of these observations here, we see that sin is in opposition to the holy God, and that's where our fuel for this righteous indignation comes from. And so we need to be angry with the sin around us, but we don't stop there. We need to target that anger to the right place in a holy way, targeting it at Satan. And then what we need to do with that is to remove the sin that's within our control. That's an observation from Josiah. Do you notice that with Josiah's story? He realizes the corrupt nation that he got and the way that it is so against the nature of God. And it reminds me of today and the culture that we live in, right? So contrary to the precepts and the law of God. But Josiah doesn't just give up. He doesn't just stay angry at the fact that that Satan has done all of this. He doesn't just let that righteous indignation sit and be mad. What he does with it is important. He decides that he's going to remove the sin that is within his control. As the king, he has a lot of control. I don't think all of us are kings, right? Even though you might think that you are, right? Sometimes of your house, you are the king. But we might not be kings. We might be bosses at times, or the leaders of families, or whatever we have within our control. We can learn from Josiah to remove that sin. So we need to be careful to be like Josiah in that way. All right, let's read one more time over here in John chapter 2. The last time that we're going to flip to a passage here. John chapter 2, verses 13 through 27. I want to read one more time. That should be verse 17, not 27. John chapter 2, we get the story of Jesus cleansing the temple. I think this is another good one to highlight righteous indignation. John chapter 2, verse 13, I'll begin. It says that the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he told those who sold the pigeons, "Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade." And his disciples remembered what was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." Jesus, fueled with righteous indignation, that they're making a commonplace and robbing the poor, right? Robbing the poor and exchanging money in an unlawful way is desecrating his Father's house by doing so. So what does he do? He has all authority to be able to drive them out with whips, right? Chase them out, overturn the tables, pour out the money pots, and tell them, "Do not make my Father's house a house of trade," right? That is his goal. And so he does what's within his power. Our example, the Christ, who oftentimes we think of as the loving and caring shepherd, the one whose yoke is easy and the burden is light, and those things do define our Savior. But whenever he sees error over something that is within his control, he's going to purge that sin out of the temple, fired and fueled up with the zeal for his Father's house. So something that we need to be careful of is that when we try to live a pacifist lifestyle because we are Christians, and we're told that we love everybody, which we do. We love every soul that we come into contact with. We don't want that to become so front and center in our minds that we forget that sin is evil, it's corrupting the world, and that we need to do what we can to get rid of it. We need to remember that side as well. So my question for you is that, do you really seek after God? I think if you're here this morning, you would say yes. Right? I'm here to learn more about God. I'm here to seek after God. But the harder question is, do you really despise evil? Does it really fuel your emotions in hatred towards that evil that you're willing to do something about it and get rid of it? I want to go ahead and have a couple practical applications and leave the message with you this morning. The first one that I want to address is to the fathers and the husbands of the audience. And I charge you, fathers and husbands, to purge your idols. Because when we talk about the example of Josiah being the leader of the children of Israel and what he did to remove the sin and the temptations from the children of Israel and then set rules and guidelines in place to lead people in a godly way, he did what was in his power as a leader, fueled by righteous indignation, to turn the hearts of the children back to God. And as a father or as a husband, it's not that you have the chance, but you have the responsibility, the God-given responsibility upon us to do the same thing. To be careful to lead our children and also our wives towards God and remove the temptations of evil to protect the family, the most important unit that God has given us within our power to control. So how are we dealing with that, right? It reminds me of Joshua 24, verse 15, which says, "Choose you this day who you will serve. Are you going to serve the Baals, right, and the idols of the land? Or are you going to worship God?" And he says, "As for me and my house," Joshua says, as the leader of his household, "we will serve the Lord." Joshua takes the responsibility upon himself to lead his family and his house to God. That's his decision. And so as we think about that, what's within our power, we also think of the charge given to those who are going to be selected as elders as showing a good example of a leader in the household. It's written that he must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. And he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect, not as a dictator or a tyrant that's ruling with an iron fist, but rather in a manner worthy of respect leads his children towards God and protects them in that way. And then I also think of the Proverbs, right? 22 verse 15, "The rod of discipline chases away folly." My mom's favorite verse that she would use on me all the time, right? You just know I love you, right? This hurts me more than it hurts you. Definitely did not. But anyway, right? We talk about that and how important it is for the father to use discipline of some sort Whether you use a rod or the wooden spoon or the timeout corner, which is really effective against me, it doesn't matter what it is. You could do psychological. Whatever it is, your discipline as a father needs to be aimed, and of course as a mother as well, to chase away sin, is what the proverb says. Chase away folly or chase away sin. That's the point of why you discipline. So fathers, purge your idols. Now, let me ask you a couple questions. As you are the one who dictates the spiritual well-being of your house, will you choose to purge away all of the sin? Or how comfortable have you gotten with sin entering the home and becoming commonplace, where you don't even realize that it's there? How about this question? What media do you allow to be played in your house? What media do you let be played in your house? I mean, at what point was one word in a movie okay? At what point was 4 words, cuss words in a movie, okay to have on in front of the children? At what age did they get where, as long as we skip a scene, then we're okay? At what point did you let them look all over these algorithms that are addicting in manner, and we don't know what they're watching? And what type of media do you let be played in your house? As a father, I challenge you that it is our responsibility to make sure that we're protecting our children and our wives from the media that is so Satan-filled with sin, that he's trying to make commonplace and try to make it just seem lighthearted or as a joke or whatever, and place it within the home. It's our jobs to remove that idol, remove that temptation of that being commonplace. That's our job. How are we doing with that? How well do I know what my child, at this point, he's 9 months old, he doesn't have a cell phone, but at what point, right, as a father, do you not know what your child is watching on TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever they're playing on the Xbox or the PlayStation? Do you even know what they're looking at? How can you be protecting your family and leading them in a godly manner if there is something that we do not have censorship over? That we have no idea what's coming into the house and invading the minds of our children. It's an evil thing that Satan tries to get to our kids with and to our wives with and our entire family. I'm just asking the question, what type of media do you let in? Is it time to reevaluate, to better protect your children and your family? Another way, how are you protecting them against lust and addressing modesty? For the sons especially, right? How are you careful with what they are looking at? Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. In what ways are you going to help teach them and protect them from developing sinful thoughts and sinful habits that can go far into adulthood? The sin of fornication and pornography is addicting in America. How are you going to protect them from that? Because it's your responsibilities, O Father, to protect them. The same thing for the daughters and for the wife as well. And even more so for the daughters and for the wives. How are you protecting them so that way they know how to present themselves in a godly manner, to protect their minds in that way? What are you doing to protect them and for your wife as well? Fathers, protect your family, right? What do you allow in that your family sees outside of media? What type of language do you use or let the people close to the family use? What types of substances do you bring into the house? What types of practices do you bring into the house that your family sees because your children are always watching? What are you doing, fathers, to protect your family? And one more for you. What rules do you have that will protect your family from all sin? And of course, sin's going to reach everybody. I mean, sin's going to reach your child. But as a father, it is your responsibility to try to remove as much of the temptations of sin as you can to build a safe environment for your children to be built up on a strong foundation. That's the goal, a strong foundation rooted in the Lord. So what are you doing? Are you passive? Letting the children walk in the way that they ought to? Letting even your wife dictate the rules? Wives, you have some incredible wisdom for your husbands, and you might have great rules for your children. But it is the responsibility of the man of the house to take it upon himself to set the rules clearly and take leadership in the way of protecting his wife and his family. Wives, I encourage you to support your husbands as they undergo that responsibility. But it is the responsibility of the man to step up and remove the sin that is so common in the house. It's our responsibility. So I encourage you to reevaluate. Let's work on it. Let's go ahead and put more of these rules in so that way we aren't just allowing sin to be complacent and commonplace. It should make you angry when you see Satan trying to get at your kid. It's evil. When Satan tries to reach your wife, you should be angry against it, and so therefore remove it like Josiah did. All right, a couple other ones here that I'll go through a little more quickly. The church, purge your idols, right? In the same way, just like Josiah did. It's the responsibility of the elders of the church to remove the sin from among. Right? You get Ephesians 5, verse 11, which is talking about the context of the church. It says, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them, shine the light upon them, and that's the job of the elders here, right? When they go through and maybe meet with you privately, or even if they need to, eventually publicly, it is their responsibility to protect the church as a whole, to present it holy and blameless before God. That's the charge of the church, is to be the blameless bride before Christ. And so if they come to you, or to me, or to whoever, to try to eradicate the sin, they're doing it out of love. They're doing it by putting on the hat of leadership that God has given them, to be able to purge the sin from the church, because it's not okay just to let it sit. It's not okay just to be commonplace. Rather, it destroys and divides the church, right? So know that the elders are looking out for the best interests of the whole church as our spiritual leaders when they try to eradicate that type of sin. And then finally here, last one, to the individuals. I'm speaking to everyone now to purge your idols. Because what do you have within your control like Josiah had? It's yourself. Isn't that the hardest thing to control? Is yourself? It's so easy for your mind to allow yourself to wallow in either the habits that you had in your past, right, and stick with old habits, or to be complacent and allow yourself to want more entertainment on your mind and not worry about the precepts of God. I mean, I know that it's commonplace now for almost everybody to be scrolling through things even on the toilet or before bed or wherever, right? You've got your phone in your hand all the time. How good are we at controlling what we see on that? That's a hard one, right? How often do you find it difficult and then next thing you know, 15 minutes have passed by of just scrolling? How often do you get weighed down by the cares of the news that are on, but it's just a habit to have the news on? You could just turn it off. Just turn off the phone. Just turn off the TV. Remove that window for Satan to get into your own life. That's just one thing that you can do, right? To have better self-control. I'm not saying that all of it is evil inherently, but it can be a way for Satan to reach you. In what ways are you going to remove the things that tempt you? In what ways are you going to be like Josiah and remove those idols? I'm going to leave you here with Jude chapter 1, verse 23. This is Jude writing to the church about false prophets and about false teachings and sin that has come into the church and has stuck. Right? It's in the church and people are becoming complacent with it. He says, save others by snatching them from the fire. To others show mercy mixed with fear, hating even the clothing stained by corrupted flesh. Interesting terminology there, right? The last little bit, hating even the clothing stained by corrupted flesh. What he's talking about is an analogy that goes back to the old law, right? Where if you were to touch something unclean, it makes something unclean. So if you were to touch a dead animal or a flesh corrupted by leprosy, right, and it touched you, it would then make you unclean. You'd have to wash and go through a ritual to make yourself clean once again. And what he's saying is even the clothing, as in the hem of your sleeve, that would lightly brush against the corrupted flesh, even hate that. Even if it didn't touch your actual skin, don't let sin that close. That's what he's saying. And his charge is to the church to be careful with the sin that you let sit around you, the false teachings that you let sit around you, because you should hate even if it is what you might deem a small problem, even if it is just a minor point, right? Hate the sin. Be fueled with the zeal for God to move it away from you. Every sin that you see, remove it with what's within your power. That's what I learned about righteous indignation from 2 Chronicles 34 with Josiah. So I appreciate your attention here this morning. I'm going to leave that with you, encouraging all of us to go ahead and purge. And really, when we leave here, take a close look at our lives and in what ways has sin become complacent, and in what ways can we, as fathers, as the church, or as individuals, purge it from our lives. We always extend the invitation at the end of our service, at the end of the sermon, that if there's anyone here who wants to commit their lives to Christ, be baptized for the remission of their sins, and to be washed clean once again, we offer that invitation to you. It's the most important thing that you can ever do in your life, is to commit your life to Christ and wash yourself clean from all of that sin that stains us. But we also open up the invitation to anybody who would like to receive prayers of the congregation or needs encouragement anyway. We invite all of you, if there is a need, to please come forward and sit on the front seat as we stand and sing this invitation song.